Let's go to another question here. So there used to be a symbolism that education was a three-legged stool, one leg the parent, one leg the school, and one leg the church. What are your thoughts on that concept? And is it reasonable that we should consider return to that?
Okay. I have some strong feelings in that regard. I worked for a public school district, I told you, as you know, for 34 years. It probably was the most faith-based public school you could have without being faith-based. Meaning, we were very careful when we hired that we had people that had a set of core values that matched ours. Ours being corporate. Greencastle, if you go to their website, they have core values listed. And we developed those during our tenure. And you know, you don't have to ask a applicant, are you a Christian? You don't have to ask them anything. You don't even have to, do you go to, I mean, you don't, but you can get an idea of the values the guy holds by the questions that you ask and by the response. So hiring is probably the #1 critical task I had to do as a principal. Could the person that I was bringing in, do they match the culture that I'm trying to build? And do they understand the culture that they're entering? So I asked a lot of non-traditional kinds of questions because everybody's resume looks good. I haven't seen a bad resume.
Yeah.
Everybody has been to college and they've have courses, and you have the transcript, you have the hard data, but it doesn't tell you about the person. But we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, does this person fit? Mm-hmm. And we also spent a lot of time hiring young teachers who were fresh out of school, coming from different schools, and we tried to mix up the schools because it's better to take a young teacher and train them up than to try to work with a teacher that already has a set of values that maybe doesn't match, even though they might have more experience, more time in the classroom. There isn't a real relationship I found between years of experience and capability. In fact, you can be a 30-year veteran and have 30 first years. You know, you never get past that first year.
Yeah.
So I can tell you, I was there long enough that I replaced my faculty one time, pretty much. And so hiring is critical. So if you hire the right people, even in a public school, and you put the right programs in, we put in a program called Character Counts. Now, Character Counts really started out as a faith-based program, but they couldn't market it because no one could afford to buy it. So we put it in, and you know, there's a lot of biblical overlay to that, but we never said that. And so the answer is you can, by your hiring, influence the culture. And during my tenure, I think we had a pretty decent faculty with a set of strong core values. I mean, they weren't all perfect and they weren't all angels, but they handled the kids beautifully. So I think that's one of the responsibilities that you have as a superintendent and a principal to do. Hiring is imperative. It will affect how your building operates. And Greencastle at that time, and again, using it was seen as the best public-private school you could go to, because we use some of the same strategies that you would in a private school. And so I think it's critical. Remember, we're a human organization. It's how you stack those humans into that organization is critical. A guy by the name of Collins wrote a book about Good to Great, I think it was. And he used the analogy of a school bus. You know, once you have to decide where the school bus is going. That's pretty easy. I mean, that's That's what a CEO or a superintendent or principal does. But then you got to decide who's in the seats in the bus, and are they in the right seat? And then sometimes you have to decide that sometimes you have to stop that bus and maybe ask a person to get off the bus. Now, it's much easier at the front end to decide who sits in the seat than it is at the back end to ask them to get off the bus. And I've done both.
Yeah.
And the latter is much harder. But if you're careful, and that's where a lot of your time needs to be spent in that hiring process, involving people. I involve department chairs. I involve, people across the curriculum within the building, so that the people understand when they were coming in what they were getting into. And so it became an enculturation. All right, enculturation translated brainwashing kind of thing. But simplistically, you said, we are Greencastle, we are children first, so it's amazing how the language that you use with the right people, with the systems that you have, you can create a culture.
Yeah.
And that's what this book is really about. But that's how I get around that.
Well, I think we could say safely that every school has a culture, and that culture is ultimately shaped from within, from the top down to some extent. But every person that's added into that program helps to shape that culture, and and we see all kinds of cultural uniquenesses in education, and some shifting radically away from traditional values. And again, it's a leadership issue. It's what's being promoted as the culture, and while it's not addressed as faith-based, it is certainly all about faith and morality, because at the end of the day, all of these issues touch on faith and morality, and a perspective of that, based on who holds what values and what is being promoted in the school. So that kind of leads me now to my next question. So for many parents, helping their students form concepts of faith and morality is a great concern. So should schools have a supportive role? If so, how?
Okay. When I taught biology, I was a biology teacher. I never could use the word God, but you still could talk about God, Mother Nature. You could, there was way, I even brought in a minister to talk about creation to counter evolution, at the same time, and the kids got to write an essay about which was, so there's ways of doing it. One of the things I've seen about leadership today is, to be a leader, you have to know who you are and what you believe.
Yeah.
And you have to not be afraid of other person's opinion. You have to rise above other person's opinions. And you got to do what's right for your kids, even if it means taking, a couple hits. I don't see that in leadership. I think the upper leadership nowadays, because of all the stuff coming from the government being pushed into schools, they don't know which end is up.
Mm-hmm.
And so they take the path of least resistance, and they say, well, I can't do this because the government says this. We had the church issues in school. I had a group of teachers that met before school for prayer. And that was okay. I mean, I even had kids in a Bible group, but I just couldn't legally have a teacher there. But the kids, they had great self-discipline. It was a good thing. You can facilitate that. But I also had a board member that didn't like the fact that we said the Lord's Prayer at the board meeting, which we did every time. You run into that, but you just push your way through it. Parents see within the first 15 minutes when they walk inside the building Now, once they get through the locked doors, once they walk inside, they can see the culture. And how do they see the culture? Well, are the teachers smiling? Are the kids laughing? When they meet the janitor, who is the most important person in the in the building, along with the secretary, and the janitor says, "Well, how can I help you? What are you looking for?" Or the secretary says, "How are you today?" All those things speak of what you speak of,
Yeah.
because it's about human relationships. And I don't care, if you have positive things like that occurring, people being helpful, people being inviting. That's exactly your teaching, because you know how you teach all this stuff. You don't teach it by telling the kids anything. You teach it by modeling.
Mhm.
Kids need to see models. And the question is, I question, what models are the kids seeing today? That would be my question, even in schools. Because, even this old timer, I even had to put a tie on for you, because I believe a tie speaks to a position. But, even dress started to deteriorate, and again, I can't say dress dictates, but I think that sets a standard. I think all those little things make a big difference.
Yeah.
And I think that it helps teach morality and values and all that stuff. How I handle a kid in discipline, or how all that stuff sums up into what you're talking about. And I don't have to open a Bible. I don't have to crack a Bible to do this. I don't even have to talk about it. I mean, there was one time you weren't even supposed to have a Bible in your office. Well, that never occurred to me. I still had one, but it used to be when I first started teaching, you'd read a Bible verse and you'd open class. They would do it over a loudspeaker, and you do the Pledge of Allegiance and all that stuff. So I think some of those system things and things that just relational things send that message. But I have been in buildings that are just super cold, where you meet people, and they don't greet you with a smile, or they don't greet you with "How are you? May I help you? Are you lost?" Or so it isn't hard. I guess that's probably one of the things I would hope came out of this book Duff and I put together, is it isn't hard. It's just downright simple, and what I would call common sense. I mean, just relational common sense.